There is also a process underway to reform development finance institutions so that they are financially sustainable and that they provide more effective support to suit our social and economic objectives. The mix of public and private sector projects is integral to our new growth path. The initiative will fail to attain its targets if we do not promote the environment that is conducive to private sector growth and business investment, particularly the small entrepreneurs. This requires government to provide economic stability and reduce the cost of capital through sound macroeconomic policy. Government has recently committed to a set of fiscal guidelines that will ensure that expenditure remains sustainable over the long term. These guidelines are informed by three principles: countercyclicality, long-term debt sustainability, and intergenerational equity. An annual target will be established for the structural budget balance that is consistent with the long-term growth and the desired level of public debt, and that does not impose an unfair burden on future workers. No less important is the need for government to establish a regulatory environment that is effective and enabling rather than cumbersome and inappropriately restrictive. Monitoring and evaluation of government policies and expenditure is also crucial. A notice has been established in the heart of the presidency for precisely this purpose. The presidency's planning commission is also working on a long-term plan for the economy that goes far beyond the 3-year framework traditionally used by government and will address critical infrastructure requirements and the challenge of building a more integrated, inclusive economy. The New Growth Path is also not the only initiative aimed at addressing the critical levels of unemployment, even though some of the initiatives also seek to augment the new growth and support the New Growth Path. In total, the 2011 budget set aside 150 billion rands to create jobs and to enhance workers' skills and productivity. These initiatives include a 9 billion rands jobs fund, which will provide financing for innovative projects with the potential to create self-sustaining employment. The Jobs Fund will receive applications from private and public sector organizations, including non-governmental and civil society organizations. Financing requirements will be shared in partnerships between the Jobs Fund and the project sponsor will underlie the scheme. Another innovative measure announced this year is the Youth Employment Subsidy. This measure will aim to increase demand for young workers by reducing the relative cost of hiring them without affecting the workers' wages. This initiative will be administered through the tax system. It will cost 5 billion over this initial 3-year period. You must have seen we have a 55-pager that is now in our website that people can actually begin to engage with. And whilst it is a discussion document, but some of its elements are already in the pipeline. Other direct employment creation initiatives already in place include a 20 billion rands in tax incentives for manufacturers making labor-intensive investments, and support for small businesses, as I've earlier indicated that small businesses are critical in growing our economy, but also addressing the inequalities in our society. This will presently drive employment opportunities in the country, and a training layoff scheme that will provide training to workers that distressed companies would otherwise have to lay off. The expanded public works programs will continue to create jobs through infrastructure, social, environmental, and community projects. This expanded public works program, which has created more than 1 million short-term jobs since its second phase began 2 years ago, will receive funding to the tune of 73 billion rands over the next 3 years. The government will also focus on developing skills and competencies to create a more productive workforce, as we would know that one of the bottlenecks or constraints to our economic growth is lack of skills. There will be a substantial investment in further education and training colleges to improve the results of students who attend these institutions. There will also be a significant investment in sector education and training authorities as they implement the National Skills Development Strategy aimed at enhancing skills across the economy. The further education and training colleges and the sector education and training authorities combined will receive some 35 billion over the next 3 years. Now, turning to some long-term interventions. The interventions I've referred to focus on the next 3 years. They are intended to fill the gap before government's longer-term strategies are put in place to tackle poverty, eliminate unemployment, and reduce inequality, and before they start bearing fruit. There's limited benefit, for example, in investing as heavily as we have or we are in skills development and training if our primary, secondary education is not sufficient, of sufficient quality. Improving basic education is one of government's key outcomes. At present, our children's exam results are poor, especially in literacy, mathematics, and science. There are too few, I would submit, well-qualified teachers, and enrollment is also very low, particularly in the areas I've mentioned. Our school infrastructure is also inadequate in many areas, or non-existent in some of the areas. To address these severe and chronic problems, funding for education has increased by about 16% over the past 4 years and will continue to grow strongly in the future. But we're also calling for partnerships also with other institutions, our DFIs and everybody else, to work with the Department of Education in making sure that the infrastructure is improved. Improving our health outcomes is another priority. South Africa is the highest disease burden, excuse me, of any of our peer countries, and the public sector is unable to cope with the demand for its services. In part, this is due to the financial demands associated with HIV and AIDS. In part, it is because many public health facilities have been poorly run in recent years with inadequate financial management and lack of accountability. A unique response is required to deal with this unique and unsustainable health crisis. A system of national health insurance, proposals for which are soon to be published by government for public comment, will seek to provide high quality and affordable health care for the population as a whole with minimal cost at the point of use. This initiative will require greater commitment to health expenditure by government and the population alike, and will impose an obligation on the public health sector to turn around its performance. The first phase of this national health insurance is already underway. The revitalization program for public hospitals is in progress, and the Office of the Health Standards Compliance is being introduced to guarantee standards across all health facilities. Funding has also been set aside for family health teams, which will work to enhance the reach of primary health care. Part of the reason why health funding is under such strain is that people often consider hospitals to be the first port of call when they fall ill, rather than consulting with primary providers first. Another area where government is planning a bold and unprecedented reform is social security. At present, South Africa relies on the social grants system to provide for the most vulnerable members of society, children, the elderly, and the disabled, if they have little or no income of their own. Otherwise, people must make their own savings and insurance arrangements. Unfortunately, this is easier said than done, ladies and gentlemen. Retirement funds are often beyond the reach of low-income workers, meaning they must rely on the old age grant when they retire, and have little or no insurance against death or disability. In order to address this, government is planning to introduce a mandatory fund which will provide retirement and risk benefits to all workers. Although the precise details of the fund have not been released, its aim will be to pool risk across the population as a whole and to complement both grants system and the voluntary pension and insurance industry. Again, the first steps in enhancing social security coverage are underway. The means test for the old age and disability grants is in process of being raised. And the pensions industry is adapting to a new regulatory environment for the financial sector, which will require greater oversight and place an emphasis on improved access, higher levels of consumer protection, and overall financial stability. The green economy. South Africa's commitment to innovation also extends to environmental policy. Our hosting of the United Nations Conference on Climate Change in Durban this year later is consistent with our commitment not only to protecting our environment, but also to integrating within our broader economic framework. Government is committed to a significant increase in the amount of power that is produced from renewable energy sources, especially wind, solar, and geothermal energy. We have established a renewable energy feed-in tariff to help such projects get off the ground, and have been delighted at the enthusiastic response that we have received. Our long-term commitment to green energy will no doubt attract the attention of domestic and foreign investors alike. With investment will come jobs. Policies are already being designed that will enable the creation of the so-called green jobs. Another prerequisite for South Africa to flourish in the long term is that we enjoy good relations with our neighbors and help to foster a stable environment in the region that is conducive to trade and investment with the rest of the world. It is worth remembering that 6 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies were in the sub-Saharan Africa, a situation that is expected to continue for the next 5 years to come. As the leading industrial and financial member of the Southern African Development Community, South Africa is committed to enhancing trade in this region and across Africa as a whole, especially by addressing the problems caused by poor transport infrastructure and customs bottlenecks. Next month, we will also be hosting a summit whose aim is to establish a free trade area incorporating SADC, the East African Community, the EAC, and the Common Market for East and Southern Africa, the so-called COMESA. The proposed area would have a combined population of nearly 600 million people and a total GDP of about 850 billion US dollars. As I said at the start, I believe these facts speak for themselves. They speak of a country that is proud of its achievements over the past 17 years, but knows that much work remains to be done to eliminate poverty and inequality and to drive inclusive growth that benefits every South African. As people speak of a government that is committed to enabling business to flourish in competitive and stable economic environment with adequate infrastructure and sufficient power, to enabling our young people to find that crucial first job or the unemployed worker to get back to the labor force, and to enabling every South African to help drive this country forward by making sure that they are well educated, that they are healthy, and that they have access to the considerable opportunities that exist today and in the future. Our government is working hard to make sure that that happens. Complacency is not an option. And I thank you, Chair.